Just counting down now. Okay, it's streaming, switching over to the Zoom meeting.
Okay, we're back again, experiencing some more technical issues with our live stream, but our IT support's working on it. So as I mentioned, we'll try and keep that going and keep you connected in as much as we can. Hopefully we won't have any more issues. So we're up to the public participation, and I note there's 3 questions being submitted for this public participation question time. So the first question is from Mr. Barry Fox from Moonabel, and his question is, would like to know where we are at with the Moonabel town water supply. I think that will be to you, Mr. Nolan.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to Mr. Fox for the question. This is a very important project that Council's had on its books for quite some time. The short answer to the question is that the project is currently unfunded, but because it's such an important project, it's worth Council actually communicating to the public some of the steps that have been taken by Council to date. In 2015, Council, in partnership with the Central Highlands Water, undertook a feasibility study. That feasibility study determined that the most feasible way of providing a potable water supply for Moonabel was via a pipeline from Avoca. Subsequently, there was further work undertaken on technical matters, including cultural heritage, alignment, and the sustainability of the Avoca aquifer to support such a project. Following that work, it was confirmed that the project cost for such a pipeline on the concept alignment was to be $7.2 million. The next step involved the completion of a business case, and in 2019, Council funded a business case to be undertaken, and that business case demonstrated that the benefits of the project outweighed the costs associated with it. Since then, Council has strongly been advocating for funding and commitment from partners to complete the project. Council is not a water authority and so needs a water authority to agree and take on the project and to agree to maintain and operate and renew the infrastructure in future. Secondly, it requires funding support from the state or federal government. In respect to the state government, the Mayor at the time, Councillor Vance, and myself advocated to advisors to Minister Neville strongly to look for support for funding. Subsequently, I have met with the then Regional Development Minister, Jacqueline Symes, who advised that whilst this project was considered a good project, it was not a priority of the state. In respect to the federal government, through MP Anne Webster, member for Mallee, Council has submitted to the Deputy PM the project for consideration under the National Water Infrastructure Development Fund. Further, in December 2020, the project was submitted along with a number of other priority projects of Council for consideration under Commonwealth stimulus funding. Ahead of the state election, there was considerable advocacy to the candidates for Ripon for support in seeking the project be funded. Of course, all of those attempts for funding to date have been unsuccessful. Council has currently allocated money in its long-term financial plan as a contribution to the project, but at the moment, the short answer to the question is that the project is currently unfunded, and Council will continue to advocate strongly for funding. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. I've got two questions now from Warborough Community Hub Committee. The district is Warborough. And question one is, the communication to our community and our committee has been below standard. What is being done to rectify this issue? Examples experienced by Warborough bin roster. Council cannot advise when collection will occur. Hot water system, council response was embarrassing. CAP plan is never looked at when allocating funds. Tennis court fencing, toilet cleaning, no communication about when, where or who and if any cleaning is being completed. Mr Nolan, will that be yours?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd be happy to take that question on notice to provide a fuller response.
Thank you. Question two, also from the Warborough Community Hub Committee. With the continued COVID lockdowns, how is the Pyrenees Shire going to support our Community Hub Committee and community in general? Maintenance issues are going to continue. We need a communication channel that is open regardless of lockdown for emergencies. Also, community grants will continue to pop up and council need to be helping our community secure grants and not dismiss them because council staff have no time to look at them. Mr Nolan, was it?
Mr Mayor, again, there are a number of elements to that question and it would be appropriate that we take it on notice and provide a fuller response.
Thank you. That concludes the questions, and I thank those members of the community for taking the time to send those questions in. It's very important that if they've got something they want to ask, that they do send those questions in or get them on the question time. That brings us to item 10, items for noting. Councillors, have you had an opportunity to have a look at those items for noting? And if so, is there any issues that you'd like to raise or discuss? Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's just two items, please, in the Planning and Development report for me. The first one is that there's a really interesting swimming pool graph in there, but I couldn't quite make sense of the colours when it came to me. I'm not sure, Mr Gowns, whether you can interpret that for us.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Clark, for your question. The bulk colour had 104 swimming pools that have been registered, and then there was, of the remaining items, there was a yellow segment with 21 properties, which was the outstanding pools that that we know about that are yet to be registered. There's 19 further swimming pools that need some further investigation, and there's 12 pools that have been removed. But it's fair to say that more than 2/3 of the swimming pools in the Shire have been registered that we're aware of.
Thank you very much, Mr Gowns. I really appreciate that, and that sounds like good progress. I've also got a second question, please. On the ABC radio a couple of weeks ago, there was a report of a PhD student who'd done an investigation into a council in Victoria who was unnamed, and I'm pretty sure it's not us, about compliance with the Tobacco Act, which is one of the responsibilities of our Environmental Health Officer. The comments he made on his report was that there was a number of effectively businesses in this municipality that he had checked on that weren't on council's register. Can you provide a comment in terms of how up to date our register would be of licensed premises licensed to sell tobacco, please?
Through you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor, for your question. Council officers are very confident that we have all sellers of tobacco registered with council, and we've also committed to ensuring that those registered businesses are compliant with the legislation, and we undertake systematic testing of that, and if there is any breaches, they do come with potentially an initial warning, but any further breaches come with quite significant fines. But I can definitely say that we're very confident that we have all registered tobacco businesses on our books.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That's all my questions. Thank you, Mr Gowns.
Councillors, any further questions?
Sorry, I've just got one to add. I just needed to add the Australia Day event to my councillor activity report. That was all. No question. Thank you.
No further questions. So those items for noting, can I have it moved that someone to move those noted? Thanks, Councillor Vance. Councillor Easton seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. Takes us to item 13, items for decisions, asset and development services. 13.1, creative community strategy.
Thank
With you, Mr Gowns.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is to seek council support for the development of a Pyrenees creative community strategy. The Pyrenees Shire is fortunate to be rich in artistic creativity, diversity and activity. Council regularly receives approaches from the community seeking to enhance and promote creativity within Pyrenees. Such proposals have included the installation of public art, participation in the National Art Trail, the enhancement and promotion of exhibitions, and the hosting of cultural and music events and festivals. In response, it has been identified that a creative community strategy would be beneficial in supporting a coordinated approach to growth in the sector, whilst identifying and protecting the identity of creativity that is unique to the region. Some preliminary engagement has been undertaken with Regional Arts Victoria, which has confirmed that RAV are keen to partner with Council and the community to develop such an overarching strategy. The strategy would look to further establish the Pyrenees as a location that fosters individual creativity and provides confidence and opportunity for creative professionals. Whilst the development of the strategy would be facilitated by Council in partnership with Regional Arts Victoria, it would be community-led and driven through extensive engagement and the establishment of a reference group. Therefore, it's the officer's recommendation that Council support the development of the Pyrenees Creative Community Strategy.
Councillors, we have a recommendation there. Someone to move that, please. Councillor Keogh, seconded Councillor Clark. Councillor Keogh, would you like to speak on that?
Only that it's a great initiative and it'll be able to capture a lot of what happens in our community and support it in a really strategic way. So thank you for the report and those people that will be inputting into that in the future.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. To add to Councillor Keogh's comment, I think it is an appropriate time. It's a bit of a step into a new space for us, but certainly it recognises quite clearly we have a number of participants in this art space across the municipality, and we're not necessarily harnessing that in any great way. And I think this is a real good opportunity potentially to do that. Thank you.
Any other councillors like to speak on that? No? All those in favour? Thank you. Item 13.2, wind farm noise regulation. Is that with you, Mr Gowans? I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that, Mr Mayor. Thank you. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with an update on the proposed legislative changes which affect the way in which wind farm noise complaints are handled, and seek Council support for a submission to the Victorian Government regarding the proposed changes to be made. Due to growth in Victoria's wind farm energy industry and complex nature of wind energy facility noise, the Victorian Government intends to introduce a range of legislative provisions into the Environment Protection Act and the Environment Protection Regulations. The proposed changes are to come into effect on the 1st of July 2021 and seek to provide certainty to industry and confidence for communities around wind farm noise regulation. The proposed changes will see the Environment Protection Agency become responsible for administering and enforcing the Environment Protection Act. Under the current regulatory framework, there are multiple pathways in which complaints regarding noise emissions from a wind farm can be managed. These include whether the facility is operating in accordance with the planning permit, or whether the energy facility is causing a nuisance in accordance and in relation to the Public Health and Wellbeing Act. The Public Health and Wellbeing Act assigns the responsibility of investigating any such noise complaints to council. In the case of nuisances associated with wind farms, a range of specialist equipment and expertise is generally required to support the undertaking of an investigation. Due to the logistical and financial difficulties associated with engaging an expert resource, the fact that each planning permit is different and that each council in the state of Victoria will have varying policies that guide their approach to managing complaints associated with wind farms, industry and public confidence in Victoria's ability to be able to manage such matters has become compromised. By transferring responsibilities associated with the management of wind farm noise from council to the EPA, council can effectively advocate for and support the community without being compromised by the need to arbitrate an alleged breach of a permit or nuisance. The Victorian Government is currently undertaking stakeholder and public consultation on the proposed changes and is seeking submissions up until the end of February this year. With council support, officers intend to make a written submission which includes a number of elements. And a couple of those elements, they're all listed in the report, but a couple of those are that council supports and welcomes the proposed changes to the regulation of wind farm noise, and that council supports that the proposed changes eliminate the potential financial burden that may be borne by its ratepayers in the instance that a matter of non-compliance or council's approach to investigation is contested in a court of law. Following the receipt of submissions, the Victorian Government will prepare and release a consultation report in April, and the new regulatory framework will come into effect at the start of July. The proposed changes allow for council to move to more effectively understand and represent the needs of the community without compromising the function of regulating wind farm noise-related matters. Therefore, it's the officer's recommendation that council acknowledges the proposed changes to the regulation of wind energy facility noise, and that council supports officers in making a formal submission, generally as outlined in the body of this report.
Okay, councillors, we have a recommendation there. Can I have someone to move that, please? Councillor Eason, someone to second it? Councillor Clark? Councillor Eason, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this recommendation because for years the Pyrenees Shire has found it always an argumentative item as to whether we are responsible or the state government is responsible or who is responsible for this, that or the other under the various planning permits issued by the state government. It will now be brought to the state government through the EPA as the responsible officer, and they have the technical know-how to be able to provide answers to our constituents that the Shire has not been able to bring to bear because of that technicality. Thank you.
Councillor Clark?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments. Certainly my observation of this matter is that this does create some significant consistency and straightforward pathway for people who have an issue, and that's a really good step forward. The Public Health and Wellbeing Act and the plans that we have to do really are not suited to this kind of work. They don't provide a process, they don't provide a resolution. There's no actual requirement to actually provide some penalty. So the Public Health and Wellbeing Act is very ill suited to actually trying to do this level of enforcement. Traditionally, council would use a proper Planning and Environment Act, or they would actually use local laws in this space, and we have neither of those tools. But I think Mr. Gowns makes another really good point that the community should be quite aware of. It actually takes us away from being part of the regulation system and allows us to be an advocate for our communities where there are issues. And I think that it particularly makes our role much clearer as council. We're there as an advocate and supporter of community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors like to speak on that item? No. All those in favour? Thank you. Takes us to 13.3, Waste Transition Update and Waste Strategy Review. Mr. Gowns, it's back with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide further information to Council on the Waste Transition Plan and the proposed review of the Pyrenees Shire Waste Strategy. A draft transition plan was provided to the state government through DELP in order for the state to understand the planned implementation of waste and recycling household reform at a local level. Council's implementation of the Waste Transition Plan will be in a staged approach based on the timing of the implementation of the 4-bin service elements. A key element of the Waste Transition Plan is to understand community needs and expectations regarding waste and recycling services. It also requires Council to provide community education and behaviour change activities. A survey has been available to the community seeking their views on current and proposed waste collection services, and these are provided to Council in an attachment to this report. These results will inform a review of Council's waste strategy, and I would point out that one of the key pieces of feedback that that waste survey has provided is that people who are not currently receiving a curbside service, in the majority, are wanting a curbside service if that was available. The transition plan proposes curbside collection services shown in the table in the report, and I do have to let Council know that there is an error in the green waste collection bin size. That at this stage there is no plan to change the 240 litre to a 120 litre, so that just needs to be amended in the minutes of the report. But it's fair to say that what is being proposed is that a Shire-wide collection from the 1st of July be implemented to include landfill waste collection on a weekly basis within townships and fortnightly basis elsewhere with the larger bin size. And a commingled recycling collection service across the Shire, and also a glass collection service on a monthly collection regime. A glass collection service will be rolled out to existing collection services prior to the new street collection contract commencing on the 1st of July 2021. And additional glass collection services to newly available services areas will be rolled out after this date. The new services for landfill, recycle and green organics will be rolled out after consultation with the community and a survey completed to ascertain the take-up rate of the new service. And food organics, as part of the 4-bin system, will be another waste stream that will be in place, that needs to be in place by 2030. However, community consultation needs to be conducted to find out what disposal method for the food organics will work best for the community. And the survey results provide some indication around how people are dealing with their food organics at this stage. And it is a complex area, but it's fair to say that this requires some further work. The Waste and Recycling Reform Program introduced by the Victorian Government will provide a standardised waste collection service that is intended to be available to all households. The household collection service will provide a cleaner and more effective waste recovery system. Therefore, it's the officer's recommendation that Council support a universal compulsory service across Pyrenees Shire for curbside collection for landfill waste, commingled recycling and a separate glass bin from the 1st of July 2021. The Council continues to investigate best practice and shared service options for the planned introduction in 2026 of a universal curbside food and green organic service, and the Council reviews the Pyrenees Shire waste strategy, taking into account the recent community feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Gowns. So I've got a recommendation there, councillors. Someone like to move that, please? Councillor Clark, second Councillor Eason. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak?
Right. Sorry about that, Mr. Mayor. Now I'm sorted. Look, I won't be the first. Thank you for the report, Mr. Gowans. Pleasing to see that we're moving to a universal collection. I think that's a really good move, and also really pleasing to see that we're going to be sensible about the green waste collection in the context of where we head from here. Just one question, if I could, please. Once we have this sorted, does that give you sufficient information in terms of actually now going out to tender for the new waste collection come 1st of July?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Clark, for your question. Absolutely. This support of this decision will make it clear in our documentation that's been prepared in readiness for this decision tonight to be able to test the market on a universal service. We haven't put that out yet because we're waiting on Council's direction on this particular area.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Gowans, it doesn't seem long enough for me to get a total new bin for glass out and functioning by 1st of July. Have we got all the support from the state government that we need to make this happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Eason, for your question. Fortunately, only as early, it was late as today, the Council were informed that the state government's first tranche of support for the change to the waste transition plan is available to councils. We'll need to apply for some money for that for that glass service. But every indication has been made that that we can meet that timeline, and now with the state government's funds that have been announced today, that we will have to go through a process to ensure we believe we can meet that time frame.
Thank you.
Any other councillors wish to speak on that? Councillor Vance.
Just want to address a question to Mr. Gowans. Do we have an endpoint for this glass that we're collecting, a processor in mind that we can go to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Vance, for your question. Council took the bold step last year to separate glass from our current waste collection, and ultimately that can only occur with the support of the community. And the community have been really fantastic in being able to separate the glass out of the recycling. So it actually has two outcomes: that our recycling can actually get recycled and not taken to landfill because of glass contamination, and the glass end product, because of the glass collection points that we have around the Shire, that product is effectively a clean product and is being recycled and used in a whole range of reuse activities. So it's great that our community can have confidence that the glass is being reused and recycled and is not going to landfill.
Councillor Coward, do you wish to speak in on that? Okay, all those in favour of that recommendation? Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item 13.4, Rotary Club signage proposal. I think it's back to you again, Mr. Gowans, is it?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with additional information regarding a signage installation project that has been proposed by the Rotary Club of Beaufort, and to seek a further resolution to Council's November 2020 meeting on the same matter. Council has received an application from the Beaufort Rotary Club seeking consent to install 2 new Service Club signage boards within the public realm at the eastern and western town entrances of Beaufort. The proposed sign design features an art easel, with Service Clubs being identified on what would be the canvas area of the easel. The proposed sign is 4.66 metres high and 3.6 metres wide and would replace the two existing Service Club signage structures. As I stated earlier, Council considered this matter at the November 2020 meeting, and point 2 of that resolution was that Council support officers to continue working with the Beaufort Rotary Club to refine the design to address the key issues raised in the report at that time. In response to the item 2, officers have met with representatives of Rotary to discuss the options for refining the design of the proposed signage. Rotary clearly expressed that they are committed to the original design and do not wish to modify the proposal, except for a change of wording on the sign. And the previous wording was that the sign had Beaufort, the art of the Pyrenees, and the Rotary Club were open to suggestions of either Welcome to Beaufort or Beaufort supporting art in the Pyrenees or Beaufort service groups. A sign of this nature within the Road Zone 1 requires a planning permit. It's a Section 2 use, unless in the instance that the works are within an estimated cost of $1 million or less and are carried out by or on behalf of the municipality. This provides 2 pathways for the proposal to be managed, with the first being via a planning permit and the second being under the auspice of Council, which activates the planning permit exemption clause. In the instance that the second pathway is selected, Council would effectively own the project and inherit the infrastructure whilst permitting Rotary to manage the installation. Whilst this option exempts the requirement for a planning permit, Regional Roads Victoria and other design principles would still apply. Options are provided in the report for Council's consideration. And the 4 options put forward are that option 1, that the proposal be progressed as per the second pathway under Council's auspice in its current design form, subject to further siting approvals. Option 2, that the proposal be progressed as per the second pathway under Council's auspice, but with modifications to the support structure design and subject to further siting approvals. Option 3 is that Council provide the infrastructure at both locations for Rotary and other community groups to affix their sign to. And option 4 is that the proposal be progressed as per the first pathway, a planning permit application being required and assessed in accordance with the Pyrenees planning scheme. Options 1 and 2 may be supported by a small grant from Council that is being considered in a separate report. Should option 3 be supported, the cost and design of installation of signs at these locations could range anywhere between $20,000 and $30,000. By selecting option 3, Council would retain the ability to influence the design and the amenity outcomes for both its town entrances and ensure that design and style objectives can be achieved. Therefore, it's the officer's recommendation that Council seeks to amend signage in its current form and that Council commits to providing 2 new sign structures at both its Western Highway town entrances for use by Rotary and other community groups in accordance with Council's signage policy. Now, as this was a late report and Council had a briefing session this afternoon, an alternative resolution is available if Council so wished to go with that. And if I could ask that be put on the screen. And the alternate resolution is that Council support the replacement of the Service Club sign frames at the 2 main entrances at Beaufort, subject to the scale of the sign to be no more than 1.5 times the size of the existing sign, that retention of an easel concept for the sign frame, the wording on the sign to be one of the proposed options included in this report, the signboard to enable flexibility to fix individual Service Club logo signs, and that any other requirements by the Regional Roads Victoria.
Thank you, Mr. Gowan. So, councillors, we have a recommendation. Councillor Clark.
I'd be happy to move the alternate, please, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
So you're
Seconded.
moving that. We've got seconded by Councillor Easton. Would you like to speak on that, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I think there's a few things here that are worth, I think, speaking in a public realm, and I do hope some members of the Rotary Club are actually tuning in tonight. It makes enormous sense that council auspices this, and we don't have to go through the rigour of a planning permit and the time and cost of that. That is really sensible. The council is always going to own the asset, and it appears to me, as a councillor, that this matter has come to us is that council has some concerns which I think need to be taken on board and need to be factored into the planning of this. And this resolution pretty clearly states what they are in the context of things. So I think that will make council's position clear to the Rotary Club in terms of working in partnership with us. And those issues really are about the scale and I think also about the functionality of the sign in that context. We're very willing to work with the Rotary Club. We're very willing to work with the design that they provided. We just need to do some adjustments, I think. So I think in this sense, this is a very sensible way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Clark's comments that we're very happy to work with the Rotary Club, but under these conditions as set out in the amended motion.
Thank you. Any other councillors like to speak? I had a virtual meeting today with some members of the Rotary Club, and they outlined some issues, and I think that amended recommendation reflects some of those things that we discussed. I think it's important that we do have our clubs and organisations recognised with the signage, and it probably is due for an upgrade. It is a community type project. And this recommendation very much still allows some flexibility for the council and Rotary to work together to achieve a really great outcome. So I think that's really, really important. So all those in favour? Thank you. That brings us to item 13.5. Corporate and Community Services, Beaufort Council Office Reception Opening Hours. Set with you, Mr Nolan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll provide these next number of reports in the absence of Kathy Bremmel, who's not able to be with us tonight. The first of these reports under Corporate and Community Services is the Beaufort Council Office Reception Opening Hours. And the purpose of this report is to seek Council's adoption of changes to the opening hours of the Beaufort Shire Council Office to be from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There was a service review undertaken of the frontline services in 2019. And following that service review, a report was presented to Council in May 2020, where Council resolved to approve a trial of 3 months for a change in the opening hours of the office from 9 to 5. Now, that trial has now finished, and there's been a number of interruptions in between as a result of COVID and the lockdown as such. But it was found during the trial that the opening hours actually were quite successful, and there wasn't a lot of impact to the general public. As a result, this report's come back to Council for Council to endorse the changed hours. So the officer's recommendation there is that Council considers the trial period of changed opening hours as successful and permanently adopts the proposed changes to the opening hours of the Beaufort Council Office from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Thank you, Mr Nolan. Councillor, we've got a recommendation there. Yeah, Councillor Vance. Seconded it. Councillor Easton. Councillor Vance, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, well, considering that the trial period has been found to be very successful, I can see no reason to make any further changes. Thank you.
Councillor Easton.
No, happy to support the recommendation.
Any other councillors wish to speak on that matter? No? All those in favour? Thank you. Item 13.6, Local Government Act 2020 Implementation and Progress Update. Mr. Nolan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to provide Council with a progress update on the implementation of the Local Government Act 2020. And there are a number of elements in this report. In the first instance, there's a table set out in the report that sets out the range of provisions in the new Act that requires Council to undertake certain things, and it sets out the time frame and the status of those. I won't go through that in detail. It's there for councils to read. But for members of the community, I'll just advise that it does include things like community engagement policy, community vision, council plan, annual budget, a revenue and rating plan, a long-term financial plan, an annual report, a gender equity action plan, a municipal public health and wellbeing plan, a municipal early years plan, and positive ageing plan. Just to name a few, whilst they're not all requirements of the Local Government Act, many of them are subject to other legislation and commitments that Council have made in the past. In respect to the community engagement, there is a proposal in the report to establish a community engagement panel and to facilitate the legal requirement of the deliberative community engagement proposed in the Local Government Act to prepare a 10-year community vision. It is proposed that expressions of interest be invited from members of the public to establish a community panel. So details of the panel are set out in the report, but essentially the remit for the panel is to ask, what is your vision for the Pyrenees Shire for 2031, and how can we support the different needs of our community? There are a number of elements of deliberative engagement that are set out in the report. That is important for Council to establish its commitment to the deliberative process. And a number of those elements around the deliberative process are included in a recommendation before you tonight, so that Council can demonstrate its commitment to its deliberative engagement. In addition, councillors, there are a number of documents that have been prepared that are presented and are attached to this report. Firstly, there's Council policy and procedure for the acceptance of gifts, benefits and hospitality. There is the community, and that policy is presented to Council tonight for adoption. It's been a policy that Council have workshopped in recent times. There's the community engagement policy. Now, this policy was considered by Council at a previous Council meeting. It's been put out for public feedback. And the feedback that's been received in the number of submissions that have been received is also outlined in the report. Some minor changes have been made to the draft policy, and as a result of the feedback received, it is recommended that there be further review of the policy in around 12 months' time. But the draft policy is also presented to Council for adoption tonight. There is a procedure that deals with conflicts of interest. So this procedure has been reviewed and again workshop with Council at a recent briefing session, and a draft procedure is attached for Council's consideration and adoption. So in conclusion, councillors, there are a number of recommendations there, and I'll read them for the benefit of the community. That Council, 1, notes the report on the progress of the Pyrenees Shire Council on implementing the Local Government Act 2020 requirements. 2, commits to the following promise as part of its deliberative engagement process regarding the community vision and the council plan. That the Pyrenees Shire Council will, A, publish the unedited recommendations of the deliberative process, B, undertake a rigorous decision-making process to adopt the recommended community vision to the fullest extent possible, C, ensure that the priorities identified by the community are incorporated into the council plan and financial plan to the fullest extent possible. And D, where recommendations are not implemented in full, council will report back to the community and explain the reasoning for the decisions made. The third recommendation is that council adopts the draft policy and procedure in relation to acceptance of gifts, benefits and hospitality 2021. The council adopts the draft policy community engagement 2021, and that council adopts the draft procedure conflicts of engagement. I think actually that is meant to, that's an error in the recommendation there. It's meant to be conflicts of interest. So with that adjustment to the recommendation, councillors, I'll put that to you to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. There's a bit in that recommendation, but all necessary, of course. So councillors have a recommendation there. Would someone? Councillor Easton, got someone to second that? Councillor Keogh. Councillor Easton, would you like to speak on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is one of the more important items on the agenda this evening. With the advent of the new Local Government Act, we have to do a lot more of various things. One of the more important things for me is our community consultation. Now, it's got the word deliberative in it, and that simply means we've got to be better at it and more across the Shire. In the past, we've had community consultation where half a dozen officers turn up with one person. That doesn't cut it anymore. We're going to invite people to join with council and to provide their knowledge, their interest and their information to help us form a better Pyrenees Shire. It is important that the people that want to be involved in this take the opportunity when it's given to them in the near future to apply and to become involved in their shire. We as councillors have made that effort over the years. We now want the community to come along with us and tell us what they want us to do, how they want us to do it, and we will endeavour to do it to the best of our abilities.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Councillor Keogh.
Just to follow on from that, a lot of work does go into these policies and they're very important because they make sure we do our job well to represent our community and that the community procedures and that work to the fairness and equity of everyone and that things work well. And as Ron just said, we thank the community for responses that we receive and we're always looking out for more responses and making sure we can refine what we do and do it even better. So thank you to Kathy in her absence and everyone else that's been involved in reviewing a lot of these documents. It's been a busy time for these policies, but it's good to get to the end part now and be able to adopt them properly and to have that input as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keogh. Any other councillors like to speak on that? No? Councillor Councillor Vince. Yeah, Councillor Vince, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I do want to speak. I am very proud of the Pyrenees Shire. I believe we perform above our weight, and I am also very proud of the fact that we've always got an ear for our constituents, and that's very important. I'm sure we can improve, but don't ever lose sight of the fact that it could be a lot worse. I'm sure that a lot of the Local Government Act is aimed at our bigger counterparts where you don't know your constituents. I know in my riding there are very few ratepayers that I don't know. So I'm quite proud to represent them, and I'm sure that they wouldn't vote us in to represent them if they weren't confident in our abilities. But if we can improve, don't be afraid to let us know in the areas where it can be made better. That's all.
Yeah, very well said, Councillor Vance. Any other councillors like to speak on that? I think it's it's really important that the community will be involved in the process and they get the chance to influence their future. I think it's important that they'll actually really physically get a chance to actually own part of that plan, which I reckon is really important. Ownership is really, really important thing. And I think if working together, that the community might get an understanding of how the council operates and their requirements, especially in developing plans, which is not always easy. So I agree with Councillor Easton and Councillor Vance. The more we can involve the community, get them on board, listen to them, and trying to make some changes moving forward that are aligned to what the community expectations are, the better we'll be and the better the community will be. So I think it's a really important piece of work. All those in favour? Thank you. So that brings us to 13.7, Councillor Code of Conduct and Councillor and Staff Interaction Policy. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Continuing with the theme of developing policies, the purpose of this report is to provide Council with an updated Code of Conduct and seeking support for the adoption of a councillor staff interaction policy. In respect of the Code of Conduct, the Act, Section 139 of the new Local Government Act requires Council to adopt a councillor Code of Conduct by the 24th of February 2021. The Act actually prescribes several inclusions within the Code, and the Code of Conduct document has been reviewed and those inclusions have been incorporated into the new Code. The Code has been workshopped with councillors at a briefing recently, and the report before you outlines some of the key elements of the Code of Conduct for the benefits of the community. Some of those elements include things like overarching governance principles, community engagement principles, public transparency, community planning, financial management, service performance, and also matters in relation to conduct. So standards of conduct, values, specific behavioural obligations, and specific conduct obligations around communication, decision-making, gifts and hospitality, disclosures of interest, and elections. So the draft Code of Conduct is attached to this report, and as I said, it's recommended for adoption. The staff interaction, the councillor staff interaction and email policy has been developed following a recent advice and recommendation from the Local Government Inspectorate. And that document again sets out to strengthen the relationships between councils and the council administration, and to establish some clear communication protocols that facilitate high standards of governance and transparency. Both the documents have been circulated and, as I said, discussed with councillors and workshopped at a previous briefing. And the recommendation is that Council adopts the draft Councillor Code of Conduct 2021. The councillors arrange to sign the adopted Code of Conduct in the presence of the Pyrenees Shire CEO, which would ordinarily have happened tonight, albeit for lockdown, and that Council adopts the supporting councillor staff interaction policy.
Thank you, Mr. Noel. And councillors, we have a recommendation there. Someone like to move that? Councillor Keogh, seconded Councillor Clark. Councillor Keogh, would you like to speak on that?
Only again, just this is an important document. It guides our conduct and it supports, in that way as well. So it's again, it's one of those things that can be quite lengthy and making sure we're getting it right, but it gives us a lot of information and support to be able to, again, as councillors, act to the best of our integrity and honour. So thank you. That's all from me. I think it's important.
Councillor Clark. Any other councillors wish to speak on that? There's a significant amount of work that comes out of these reviews and things that we have to do, and it's a credit to the council officers working behind the scenes. There's just a significant amount of work in these, and they're such important guiding documents. We have to get them right and try and have to get them right at the first time, so we don't have to go back and revisit them all the time. So I commend those officers that are working so hard behind the scenes, putting in, a massive amount of hours to get these policies and all these things, the codes of conduct done. They're a very important piece of work. So all those in favour? Thank you. Brings us to item 13.8, community grants. Back to you, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is round one of this program, and the community be well aware that Council provides a community grants program and budget to provide opportunity for community groups to make application for access to some funding to do important work in the community. And the program is split into two elements: community grants, where community can seek grants of up to $1,500 for programs and equipment, or up to $750 for events, and community capital grants, where community can seek support for grants up to $5,000. Round one of this program has been advertised and applications were invited, and a list of the applications is contained in the report. Generally speaking, the number of applications received is less than the money available, and Council has, at a previous briefing, workshopped the various applications that have been received. In addition, there was a late application or request for funds, and this was from the Karambalik group that related to the Harvest Fest that was held, where there was a request for $750 to be approved. So in addition to that, there is a number of the projects applications that Council may be willing to support, and there is a recommendation before Council, and I'll ask Ms. Bowker to share the screen with the recommendation, which contains the recommended allocations. So, firstly, councillors, it's recommended the Council allocates community grants program funding for round 1, 2020-2021 as follows. Avoca District Historical Society for repainting windows and doors, $1,500. The Beaufort Historical Society for preservation of historic documents, $1,500. The Beaufort District Pony Club cross-country course upgrade, $1,450. The Avoca Preschool for fridge freezer replacement, $1,000. Beaufort Football Netball Club, purchase of a laptop, $1,500. The Beaufort Agricultural Society, replace pavilion doors, $1,500. The Evansford Community Centre, barbecue pavilion upgrade, $3,356. Project Platypus Association Inc., for stakeholder participation to develop strategic direction for land care in 2021, $750. And the Rotary Club Beaufort to upgrade service club signage boards at the east and western entrances to Beaufort on the Western Highway, which was the subject of a report to Council earlier, for $4,010. Secondly, that Council endorses the actions of the Chief Executive Officer to provide to award $750 in urgent funding to the Harvest Subcommittee of the Skipton Football Club to enable building inspector approval marquee facilities to the hired for an event scheduled for February 2021. The Council seeks further information in respect of the Beaufort Progress Association Inc.'s application, and that a report be brought to a future Council meeting for decision, and that Council approves a special grants category within the existing Community Grants program to allocate grants of up to $1,000 for programs or projects designed to increase inclusion and diversity for Indigenous peoples, members of the LGBTIQ plus community, to prevent discrimination or victimisation, and to promote gender equality in our community.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. We have a recommendation there, councillors. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Clark, seconded Councillor Easton. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak on that?
Mr. Mayor, I want to say we do apologise to the community. We've been a little bit slow getting those out elections, and they only come around every 4 years. Just kind of did disrupt us a little bit, but we're on the case now. And there will be another round of the community grants before the year's end. So for those groups that didn't get into this one, there's certainly another opportunity coming up quite soon. Yeah, great worthwhile projects in the community to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Easton? Any other councillor wish to speak on that? No. We did note, as Mr. Nolan mentioned, that there was a reduced amount of grant applications, which probably doesn't cease to amaze us at times when we find organisations and clubs and etc. through the year looking for funds and money, and we open up the grants, but quite often we don't get enough applications to acquit all the money. So I just encourage any organisations, groups, etc. to submit applications, and if they're not quite sure about it, seek assistance from the community grants officer or application to help you with those applications. Councillor Vance?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, just an aside, a fortnight ago I had the pleasure of showing a group to the local historical society in Landsborough, and one of those people pointed out to me that all their family history and important documents were stored in a wooden cabinet in the corner of the old Barclay room. Now, if it was unfortunate enough that a fire was to go through, they would lose everything. So I'm putting it out there, if there are any people watching tonight's stream, that council are prepared, I'm sure, to support historical documents that can be put on file digitally, so that they are not lost in the case of a disaster. So if there's historical groups or others that are in this situation, please don't hesitate to apply.
Thank you, Councillor Vance. Yeah, look, it's very true. I know the Beaufort Historical Society, they work very hard in, transposing some of that stuff onto electronic, making it electronic. And it's such a tedious and arduous job. It's no necessarily easy way to do it, but it is our history, and it's tells such a great story of the past and even pretty much the present. So it's really important that when we can, if we support those organisations, to make sure that our history is effectively sustained. So all those in favour? Thank you. Brings us to, item 13.9, Federal Electoral Boundary Review for Victoria. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to bring to the Council's attention the Federal Electoral Boundary Review, and to seek some direction in respect of whether or not to make a submission. The redistribution of federal electoral divisions in Victoria commenced in July of last year, undertaken by an independent committee. There's a significant process to this, a number of steps. We're already partway through that process with comments on public submissions, and the next step is that the committee will be looking to release proposed electoral divisions within the very near future. and seeking any objections to the redistribution proposals. So currently, councillors, as you'll be aware, Pyrenees Shire is split in half with the division of the Electoral of Mallee to the north and Wannon to the south, both of which are considered to be safe or very safe seats. And there are some benefits, some advantages and disadvantages of being split. Of course, one of the things to consider is the impact on communities of interest and the opportunity for our communities in the Pyrenees to be appropriately represented. Now, whilst the divisions, the draft divisions, have not yet been released, we expect that to be fairly soon. And this recommendation is in anticipation that they are released soon, and that there may or may not be a need to make a submission. So the recommendation is that council seeks to lodge an objection to the draft federal electoral divisions once they're released, only if the Chief Executive Officer considers there to be an apparent disadvantage to the Pyrenees Shire communities of interest because of the draft divisions.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillors, we've got a recommendation there. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Vance? Someone said that? Councillor Rees and Councillor Vance, would you like to speak on that?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory, Mr. Mayor. We'll leave this in the capable hands of the CEO and see what the outcome is. If we see something that really disturbs us, we'll certainly let him know to make sure that we get our objections in there.
Indeed. Thank you. Councillor Easton? Any other councillor wish to speak on that? No. All those in favour? Thank you. 13.10, mobile black spot program. Back to you, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Telecommunications coverage across the Shire has been a really important part of Council's advocacy program. Council have, in the past, advocated strongly for funding under previous stages of previous rounds of this program, and a number of the preferred sites that Council has nominated have previously been funded. Council's also actually contributed financially to a couple of early base stations being established. And we'll recall the base stations established at Moonabel, Landsborough and Lexington, and also Warborough Amphitheatre, and more recently the successful application for base station at Mina Park. Council considered a previous report on this prior to a previous round and identified a number of sites that might be suitable for base stations that would look to address the black spots currently in the network. And under the current round, it is intended that we look to work further with the mobile network operators, because it's only those operators that are able to make application for funding. So it is effectively recommended that that Council seeks to work with the relevant mobile network operators to make application for funding under the Mobile Black Spot program, and continues to advocate for ongoing program funding until the mobile black spots are sufficiently eliminated in the Shire.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Council's got a recommendation there. Would someone like to move that, please? Councillor Clark, second, and Councillor Easton. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak on that?
No, I think it's straightforward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Easton? Any other councillor wish to speak on that item? No? All those in favour? Thank you. Item 13.11, Local Road and Community Infrastructure Program, Stage 2. Back to you, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. the purpose of this report is to seek direction from Council about the projects to be funded under this phase of the program. Council considered a report in July of 2020 regarding the allocation of $1.39 million through the same program under phase 1, which was designated by the Commonwealth Government as part of its economic stimulus package. Council endorsed a number of projects to be funded under that phase of the program, and successful applications were made and works are currently underway on those phase 1 projects. In the last quarter of 2020, the Commonwealth advised of a phase 2 of the program, with Pyrenees allocation being $1.126 million. The program guidelines are similar to those of phase 1, and eligible projects are described in the body of the report, but essentially for a range of road and community infrastructure type activities. When Council considered a number of projects previously, there are a number of criteria that were considered relevant to the selection process, and essentially they relate to providing priority to projects that have previously been identified in a forward works program, projects that renew existing infrastructure, projects that create local employment, projects that are relatively easy to deliver and generally shovel ready in order to be able to complete the works by the end of this calendar year, and projects that help to deliver identified community needs or plans that have been endorsed by Council, and projects that reduce Council's long-term financial burden. Now, there have been a number of projects considered by Council prior to this meeting tonight, and there is a recommendation for a number of for Council to endorse projects to be submitted. And I asked Ms. Bowker to put up on the screen the recommendation. So the recommendation is that Council endorses the following projects to be nominated for funding under the Local Road and Community Infrastructure Program Phase 2. The Tanwood Avenue of Honour, $71,500. Growing our tree canopy, $50,000. Resilient floodways, $154,000. Road construction of Orme Street, Avoca, Pyrenees Highway to Pearson Street, $120,000. Road upgrades, including Wright Street, Crowlands, $330,000. Footpath upgrade, High Street, Avoca, $200,000. Footpath construction, Beaufort Highway East, $200,000, being a total of $1.126363.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Council, we've got an alternative recommendation there. Would someone like to move that?
Happy to move.
Councillor Clark. Councillor Vance seconded. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak on that?
I think Councillor Vance will say this as well, but I say full credit to Ms. Jill Hunter for working on us for the Tanwood Avenue, and it's in there as a project, so let's hope the city's funded.
Councillor Vance.
Yes, I'd only endorse Councillor Clark and assure Mrs. Hunter that persistence has paid off, Jill. We do listen. Sometimes we're restricted by lack of funds, and when we first got the opportunity to fund it, we've done it for you, so well done. And it'll also be great to see the continuation of the Crowlands Road upgraded for the heavy B-double traffic that goes from out of the Wimmera through to Lacaput and off to Geelong, those areas.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak on that item? Councillor Eason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to congratulate Jill for getting the project up, but I would like to pass on to anybody who's watching and listening, persistence does pay off. Just because it doesn't happen in 5 minutes doesn't mean we're not listening. Continue to talk to us, continue to work with us. It's amazing what we can do eventually. Councillor
Cow, would you like to speak on the item on there? No. really good to see that Tamworth Avenue get up. It has been discussed a number of times, over the last couple of years. So those avenues of honour carry a lot of significance for a lot of people in the community, probably much more than we understand. So it's really important that they do get the recognition, and to have this one restored is just fantastic. So I'm really pleased. All those in favour? Thank you. Item 13.12, Goldfields Recreation Reserve and Surrounds Master Plan. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Goldfields Recreation Reserve is a high-use community asset, and councillors know the asset very well, so I won't bother describing it. It's described in the body of the report. In 2017, Council prepared and endorsed a Shire-wide recreation strategy, and that strategy identified the preparation of a master plan for the Goldfields Recreation Reserve as a priority action for Beaufort. A master plan will enable the community, user groups and partners to have input into the plan and assist prioritising future works. And the master plan will also seek to clarify service standards and alignment of management responsibilities. This will be a strategic document that Council then referred to in terms of informing future decisions around improving and modifying assets. The report is there for Council to consider. The reasons for the master plan are clearly outlined. There is a recommendation, therefore, that the Council support the creation of a master plan. It's currently unfunded in Council's budget, and it is recommended that that money could be allocated from Council's current working capital surplus. So in conclusion, the master planning for the Goldfields Recreation Reserve and Lake Surrounds has been identified as a priority action in Council's REC strategy. The reserve is a high-use community asset, and the plan will assist guide future development and prioritisation of works in the precinct. The recommendation is that Council allocates up to $80,000 towards the preparation of a master plan for the Goldfields Recreation Reserve at Beaufort, incorporating the Beaufort Lake Surrounds and other relevant adjoining land use activities.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillors, we've got a recommendation there. Would someone like to move that, please? Councillor Clark, second Councillor Easton. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Mayor, could I move a slight amendment, please, to that recommendation? And could I change the figure of $80,000 to the figure of $50,000, please?
Yeah, so put that recommendation forward. Someone like to second that? Councillor Vance. Yep. Councillor Clark, do you want to speak further on that?
Just quickly, I think the figure when I first saw it does look fairly significant, and it may not actually be the wrong figure in the context of what has to happen at the Goldfields Reserve. Because if you think about it, it is the lake, it is the caravan park, it is the recreation reserve, it's the area along the beach, the wall. It's a quite significant and not complex, but certainly there are a lot of moving parts in that asset. I think it's more appropriate in our community that we actually just take this in a couple of bites, because certainly the $80,000 would cover, I think, a number of things that we know need to be done around the entrances, around the entrance to the caravan park, in terms of some design work and new roads and those types of things. But my preference would be, and hence the change, is that we take it in bites. We look at basically the master plan and those key elements in the first bit, and if further amounts of money required from council, that they be requested through this same process.
Thank you. Councillor Vance, do you want to speak on that?
No, I'm quite happy to endorse Councillor Clark's comment.
Any other councillors wish to speak on that? I did think that 80,000 it seemed a little bit steep myself, and I agree with Councillor Clark that if we take it in steps, the funding will be there, but we perhaps don't need to devote that much in the first instance. And I think the current plan is a little outdated, is my understanding. Is that right, Mr. Nolan?
Mr. Mayor, yes, it is, and it doesn't cover. It's not extensive. Plan only covers part of the precinct and some landscaping, which some of which is now obsolete following more recent community engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Yeah, so it's really necessary to have the plan moving forward, and it's got to be contemporary. It gives the user groups a voice in the planning and development because they'll be consulted and they'll have some input into the plan and be able to have their say in what happens up there in the future. Will certainly have some influence in relation to it, and I think it's really important that it provides a really, really important reference document for any future applications for grants and funding. If it's contemporary, we can use that document straight away if we're making applications for funding. So it's really, really important. So all those in favour of that amended recommendation. Thank you. Item 13, climate change pledge. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider a request from the Victorian Government to make a climate change pledge towards reducing greenhouse emissions. At the August Council meeting, Council received correspondence from the Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change requesting that Council consider submitting a pledge to acknowledge actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. A report to the September Council meeting was presented about the pledge, and that was just ahead of the Council election period, and Council resolved to defer a decision on that until after the new Council was in place and as part of the development of the new Council plan. The Victorian Government's Climate Change Act 2017 sets a pathway for Victoria by legislating a target of net zero emissions by 2050 and provides a signal for all sectors of the Victorian economy for sustained and significant actions to reduce emissions. Councils are invited to take up a voluntary pledge to participate in the same objective. The report that's before you sets out a range of current activities that Council is involved in the space of sustainability, and some of those include the Local Government Power Purchase Agreement. This is a project that Council will participate with a number of other councils to commit to purchasing renewable energy. And that project is currently in the tender assessment phase. The Charging in the Regions project is a project done in conjunction with the CVGA, the Central Victorian Greenhouse Alliance. Road lighting upgrades, also in conjunction with the Alliance, to replace street lights with energy efficient lights. The MASH program, which is currently underway, which supports an increase in opportunities for residents in our Shire to take up the options of solar and battery systems through a bulk purchase arrangement. The Cool at Stage 2 project is all about planting trees in streets to make our environment cooler and to increase the vegetation, and a range of other advocacy and shared service projects that all have the objective of ensuring Council is responsible in looking to be efficient with its energy use and take measures to reduce its environmental footprint. In support of that, there is an attachment to the document which sets out a range of climate change actions to reduce and mitigate greenhouse gas and also mitigate the impacts of climate change. And the recommendation before your council is that council endorses the Climate Change Response Mitigation Action Plan, which is attached to the report, and in doing so pledges to take action to combat climate change and its impacts.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. I've got a recommendation there, council. Someone like to move that? Councillor Clark, second to Councillor Easton. Councillor Clark, would you like to speak on that?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I think this is a really good little document for the community, just to see just how many things that we are doing in this space. And I know that the CEO has mentioned some of them, but the ones that really jump out at me are the straw pellet project in the context of what it can provide as an alternative energy source. The street lighting work, which we've done some of, and we've got more to do. The fact that we spent $100,000 on solar PV in this last year. And that we're in the process at the moment with, I think, 47 or 49 other councils in the state to purchase our electricity in a bulk buy process that will effectively give us 100% renewable energy at a cheaper price than we're paying today. So there's a lot that we're doing. The only thing I would say about the report is that it is very much the current state of play. It's not what we're looking to do, I suppose, in the future. And I particularly, and I've said this at a council briefing, I'm very interested in what we might think about doing in terms of our fleet, particularly our light fleet, our cars, but also our heavy fleet over time. But rather than put that in the report, Mr. Nolan, the question I'd probably have is, when is it probably appropriate for this to come back to council for an update? And my sense would be 12 months would be an appropriate time.
Thanks, Councillor Clark, for the question. I guess it was intended that endorsing this tonight would provide some input into the council plan process. But as part of our deliberative engagement commitment, we'll be looking to seek some input from the community. And if there's a sense in the community that there are a range of other measures around climate change or environmental sustainability that might need some consideration, it would be intended to bring those back to council to consider once that engagement process has been undertaken, and depending on what those issues are, it may be either close to or prior to adopting a council plan or at some point after that.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy with that.
Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report shows us what we're looking at, what we've been doing. I'd just like the community to know that I've been on council now for 8 years. It wasn't long after I came on council that we were looking at these sorts of things. We've been implementing solar power within the community sites that we control. This is something that we've been doing over time, and we will continue to do to try and improve our footprint.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillor Vance?
Just to reiterate on Councillor Clark's comments about moving from fuel-powered vehicles to electric vehicles. I think this is an area that we've really got to take serious, and it seems that council lead the way on a lot of occasions, and there might well be in 12 months' time that we seriously consider some of our fleet vehicles switching over to electric. And I'm keen for especially Beaufort, to have a charging station involved somewhere in the town that is right up to speed with the latest technology. I believe we've got one in Bakery in the park, but I'm not sure that it's nothing more than a 3-pin plug-in that takes hours to charge. But if we can get something that is right up to speed where you can charge within 20 minutes and away you go again, it'll be a great asset for our town.
I totally agree, Councillor Vance. Councillor Keogh, do you wish to speak on that? So we've got that recommendation. All those in favour? Thank you. 13.14, wind farm valuations. Back to you, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to bring to Council's attention a recent Supreme Court ruling in respect of valuation of wind farm assets and to seek direction about any further action that Council may want to take. The Supreme Court ruling relates to a ruling dated 16th December 2020 involving the Ararat Wind Farm, the Ararat Rural City and the Valuer General Victoria. The document from the Supreme Court is attached to the report. I won't go through it in detail. There is a summary of that and potential impacts in the report. Essentially, the ruling found that for the purposes of valuation, the assets associated with wind farm, including their turbines, were considered to be non-fixed, in other words, chattels, and therefore reduced the capital improved value of the land. In respect of council's revenue is determined through the payment in lieu of rates under the Electricity Industry Act. And so on the surface of it, you might not think that council's revenue would be at risk there. However, there are possible risks to council's revenue rating, which are outlined in the report as a consequence of the Supreme Court ruling. Without going into that in detail, I will suffice to say that it's understood that there may be an appeal to the Supreme Court finding by the Valuer General Victoria. There are other avenues from the state government should there be adverse impacts on revenue both for council and the state. The state obviously impacted by the fire services levy, of which wind farm owners pay quite a considerable amount. However, given the risks associated with the ruling, the recommendation is that Council 1 acknowledges the potential risks associated with the Supreme Court ruling, and 2 seeks to bring the matter to the attention of the local government minister.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Recommendation there, Council. Someone want to move that, please? Yep, Councillor Easton, the seconder. Councillor Vance, do you wish to speak on that, Councillor Easton?
No, it seems to be an item that's likely to be dealt with in the courts. We'll wait and see what happens.
Councillor Vance?
Yeah, we just sit back and watch this space, I believe.
Yes, it's a bit like that. Any other councillor wish to speak on that item? No. So we have a recommendation there. All those in favour, please. Thank you. Brings us to item 13.15, petition in relation to a pump track. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to consider a petition requesting a pump track in Avoca due to the lack of spaces for young people to safely ride bikes and scooters away from traffic. The petition was initiated by students at the Avoca Primary School and supported by the school itself. And also we received an extensive letter from another resident in support of the project with some further suggestions about the implementation of it. Essentially, what the students are saying is that there's a lack of opportunity for kids in Avoca to safely ride bikes and scooters away from traffic, and that council consider funding and building a pump park. Now, the words pump park are not actually used in the petition, but they effectively represent what's currently understood in the industry to reflect what is being requested. Council has governance rules which set out a certain process for Council to consider any petitions it receives, and that section 4.8.3 states that no motion may be made on any petition, joint letter, memorial or other like application until the next council meeting after that at which has been presented, except where it meets rule 4.9b, except for that the petition be received, that the petition would be referred to the CEO or relevant director for consideration and response, and that the petition be referred to the CEO or relevant director for a report for a future council meeting. So the purpose of tonight is not to consider the merits of what is being requested, but rather for council to receive the petition. And secondly, the recommendation is that council requests a report to be presented to a future meeting for council for decision once there's been some investigation into what has been requested.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Councillor, we've got a recommendation there. Would someone like to move that? Councillor Vance, Councillor Easton, seconded. Councillor Vance, would you like to speak on that?
No, we're just dealing with a procedural matter here, Mr. Mayor. There's nothing to be really said for it.
Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I've been spoken to by a number of people about this item, and I fully support the recommendation, but I would like to put in place the report that we expect back from the officers. We're not asking for a velodrome, we're not asking for a Taj Mahal. The kids want somewhere to ride their bike, probably in the dirt, and there'll be a lot of reasons why we can't give them what they want or how they want it. We only want a simple dirt track where they can go and ride a bike. And if that's not available to kids in the country, we've got serious problems.
Thank you, Councillor Easton. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to Mr. Nolan or possibly to Mr. Gowans. Are we limited in our investigations here to just look at council land, or are we able to look potentially at Crown land as well in the context of what potential sites may be?
It's not limited to just land that's in council ownership or management. It would be appropriate to look at a range of options.
Thank you.
Councillor Keogh, just to speak in on that. Thank you, councillors. We've got that recommendation here. All those in favour? Receive that. Thank you. Item 13.16, joint letter, off-leash dog park in Beaufort. Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, this is somewhat of a procedural matter. The purpose of the report is for council to inform council about a proposal for a off-leash dog park for Beaufort. Now, it's considered effectively a joint letter, essentially because it's a proposal prepared by two parties, Ms. Heather McCracken and Celia Myers, requesting council to establish an off-leash dog park in Beaufort, and a copy of the proposal was provided to councillors a number of weeks ago in hard copy by the proponents. The submission outlines a number of benefits for a park, for such a park, and proposes a site and name for the park, as well as a number of design considerations. And the authors have published their proposal in the Pyrenees Advocate and received several letters of support. So, similar to the last item on the agenda, councillors, in accordance with council's governance rules, it states that no motion may be made on any petition or joint letter, except for that the petition be received and that a petition be referred to the CEO for a relevant director for consideration and response, and that the petition be referred to the CEO for relevant director for a report for future meeting. The proposal has, therefore is, there's a recommendation, therefore, that Council receives the joint letter submission and requests a report to be presented to a future Council meeting for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Got a recommendation there, Councillor. Someone like to move that? Councillor Clark, second, and Councillor Easton. All those in favour? Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item 14, Councillor reports and general business. So we might go to Councillor Vance, if you could provide your report, please. I think you're on mute, Councillor Vance.
That'll be right. Yeah, get your finger on the button. I had the pleasure of attending the Australia Day function along with the rest of my fellow councillors at Trawalla. The weather wasn't all that kind to us, but it went off extremely well, I thought. Congratulations to the award winners, and a very successful day was had by all. Yeah, another report. Last Friday I was on a Zoom meeting with the Rural Councils of Victoria. We had the Regional Development Minister, Mary Ann Thomas, address us for about 30 minutes. We were all able to connect via Zoom, but unfortunately the Minister was unable to connect. She had to come in via her phone. So we only had a photo of the Minister while we listened to her speak. She made quite a few different points. One she did address was the public housing issue. She realises that there's a very extreme shortage of social housing, workers' housing, and also housing for professional people in the regional areas. And they are hoping to address this issue. I know it's a problem for our council. We've got positions that are available in the immediate area for workers, but finding housing for them is going to be a problem into the future. She also addressed the area of strategic planners. There's an extreme shortage of those, and especially for the smaller councils. We talked about roads funding, and all the smaller rurals were of the one opinion that we need it made easier to access grants for our roads funding that don't need matching funds. I know in the past 18 months we've been reasonably successful, but the need into the future is not going to go away. And a couple of personal things, or the constituents have brought to me, is we've got a new toilet at Warborough. We just still don't have any signage on the highway to indicate that it's there. And my memory takes me back to the local store owner who brought it up to council in the first place, to the lack of facilities for the passing traffic. So maybe if we take note of that one. And to the reverse, I had a constituent complain to me about a give way sign on the Barclay Frenchman's Road. When you're approaching from Avoca on the Stall Avoca Road, if you happen to be on a motorbike early in the morning, the glare off the back of the sign is extremely hard to cope with when you're on a motorbike. So I'm not sure whether we can go out there with a bit of black paint and just dull it down a little bit, but it was raised as an issue. So that's all for me. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Can you just state that road again, Councillor Vance?
Yeah, the Avoca Stall Road.
Yeah.
It's where the Barclay Frenchman's Road intersects with that road. Yeah. So it's on the Frenchman's end of that road, Doug.
Thank you. Councillor Easton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too, with my wife, attended the Australia Day event in Trawalla, and it was a great day. The weather wasn't great, as Councillor Vance said, but the day went off really, really well, and the award winners were well and truly deserving. In Avoca, we've got the kids' playground underway. I expect to see that finished probably in the next month to 6 weeks, and it'll be another asset for the town, for people coming through, and another reason possibly to stop and stay for lunch or a picnic or whatever. Another one of our projects coming to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rees. And Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, February's here, and most of my committees that I represent council on are back and active. I've had a CVGA Finance Committee meeting as I'm the Treasurer there. The Highlands Land has had its first meeting for the year, and looking particularly at its GROW project, which finishes up in August. So we're looking for more funds from the government to run that through a bit further. And I was pleased to attend the community advisory group that I chair for the Langley prison. Really interesting to talk among the prison staff about how they've gone through with COVID and managed to keep their industries running and keep morale up in that sense of things. But yeah, doing a really good job in that sense of things and going quite well in there. I've had a few constituent matters around the place, a couple at Warburg in that sense of things, and they've been reported through to council and then the council meetings. And just finally, for me, I think certainly Australia Day was, again, a terrific one, as all the other councillors have commented. I made a couple of comments in my column the week after that that's created some interest in the local paper, which is all good. But I think the bit I would just add to that in the context of the bit that probably wasn't in the paper that I think is really important is that Australians don't rush to decisions about things like this. We are very much in an education awareness learning phase about some of the things that happened to our first people. And certainly I think as council we can do some work as part of our reconciliation action plan to promote that understanding, promote that awareness. And I think we've got a fair road of that to go yet before we would have any worries about changing the date. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Keogh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's been a bit of a crazy weather time, which I think we've also all been adding into our columns in the paper, and the effects on farmers. The harvest has been great, and but they're having to watch a lot of the sheep down this way to make sure that the weather conditions don't lead to other conditions that are not so good. But we've been very blessed with good results basically across the board. So in spite of COVID and going back into restrictions and things, that's a positive in light of other results. Speaking of harvest, the Carambellic Ball was sold out. I think there were people still trying to get tickets. It was a wonderful event to have. Again, with restrictions and taking into account the effects COVID's had on these sort of community events, was wonderful. And as our earlier report had indicated, there was that need to support them at that late stage, but it was definitely well worth and helping that area of our community, of our municipality. We've also, the Snake Valley Skate Park has been continues to be very, very popular. However, we did have a slight little time there where there was some graffiti and some rubbish that was a concern. That hasn't been seen again. I think it's been resolved at this stage, and as it was still being used up until lockdown a few days ago. The Snake Valley Reserve now, which has had a number of activities occur, particularly over the warmer months when it could come together, they've now got a lovely sign, which was a collaborative project with the Linton's Men's Shed. And I think it's a wonderful example, again, of community groups getting together and supporting each other. And that reserve group are looking at having an official opening on the 21st of March. So that would be very exciting to be part of that. The Snake Valley RSL have also met, and I know there'll be a number of other groups waiting to see what can happen or how they can hold Anzac Day this year, which again is a big event across the Shire. So to see how that will roll out will be quite interesting. And they're also looking at options to seal their war memorial pavement to alleviate the burden on a number of the members who are becoming more elderly now. And so we're looking at some options of that at the moment, or they are rather, and other grant opportunities. And I will finish up with Australia Day as well. What a fantastic event, and what a wonderful turnout, and just such a great contribution from so many people and so many members of our community, but also our visitors, as Councillor Clark has alluded to. But despite the weather, you couldn't have had a warmer crowd, and it was just absolute credit to the Trawalla community there, and very exciting. I'm looking forward again to next Australia Day, and as Councillor Clark said, looking into those, looking into it in a bigger picture, and continuing to learn more about ourselves and our community, and embracing everyone. It was, I think that was a wonderful start to do that. So that's all from me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Keogh. So I've just had the Mayor and CEO's meetings. We have those of a Monday afternoon, and we discuss a number of items, council meeting, council briefing sessions. The Australia Day event, like everyone, I'm only going over whatever all the council already said, but it was a fantastic day regardless of the weather, and it was a real credit to the staff, the council staff, who took a lot of time and effort in setting up and trying to cater for whether it was going to be rain or whether it was going to be sunshine, but they had it all covered, and a lovely morning tea and a bit of lunch, and it just all went off really nice. And I thank all those people for making the effort to come out, brave the conditions, whatever they might have been, but and come to that day and make it such a special day. And all those award recipients certainly were very worthy of those awards. Had a meeting with Rotary, some constituent matters. I'd just really like to thank the council staff for the work they've been doing when we've gone into lockdown, and at very short notice we've had to go back to having our meetings and briefings and things virtually because we can't meet in the same room. So thank you to the staff. There's a significant amount of work that goes on behind the scenes, including the IT, to make this all happen. I thank the councillors for their patience and flexibility, because we all probably enjoy getting in actually and physically being in the same room and having a bit of banter, but having the necessary discussions. But it is what it is, and we just got to go with what the restrictions are at the time. But I certainly look forward to getting back to those personal meetings. I think it's a much better way. And again, just thank the staff for all the work they do in putting these virtual meetings. Like I said, there's a lot of work in there. So, and thanks to the local communities for their resilience. They're in the same boat, they're in and out of lockdown, and they're 1 minute they've got rules and regulations, and next day not so many. But I thank them, the communities, for their resilience across the municipality. They have really been really resilient. They've done the right thing, and that's showed that we've had no infections. So it's a real credit to those communities, and a lot of those businesses certainly are suffering, and even individuals suffering with not being able to get out to necessarily exercise or mental health stuff. So it's really important that when there's restrictions ease, we try and get back to some sort of normality as quick as we can. But anyway, everybody hang in there. That's about it for me. So that brings us to item 15, which is the confidential items. So could I please have someone move that we move into closed Councillor Keogh, second to Councillor Clark. Thank you. So we'll now stop the live stream and move into the closed meeting.
I've stopped the stream.
Stop.